Hello students, uh, let me first of all introduce myself to you. Since you children are new to this building and you don't know us very well, I am your English literature teacher. My name is Miss Tania Chaudhary Ghosh and I teach English to the students of this building. You have been listening to my voice in the audio that you have received all these months. Children, today's chapter is chapter number 4, Meeting Miss Trotwood. Before we begin the chapter, I really want each one of you to go through the details that I've sent you in the PowerPoint presentation on Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens, as I've mentioned there also, is a very important, in fact one of the most important writers in English literature. So you really need to know him, look at his picture, see his picture so that you can identify him later when you see him in some journal or some magazine. Okay, now coming to Miss Trotwood, Meeting Miss Trotwood, Chapter 4. Written by Charles Dickens, one of Charles Dickens's favorite novels, as he says. The character of David very close to his heart because through David he has expressed a lot of his experiences of life. That is the reason why he loved this character. He's found himself being brought to light with the help of this character in his novel. Let's begin, children. Think of your favorite grown-up. On a sheet of paper, draw a quick sketch of the person and write 3 words that describe the nature of the person. Compile all the portraits created in the class and create a display chart. Now the last portion of this instruction given here, compile all the portraits created in the class, create a display chart, is not possible since you're not coming to school as a class, so you don't get to meet your friends, you don't get to see the work of the others. So you are going to do this an individual work, children. This is an activity based on this chapter. You'll take a white sheet and on the white sheet you will write the name of your favorite grown-up. Could be your mother, could be your father. We all have our idols, isn't it? You all also must be having your idols whom you look up to, like whom you want to become. You want to grow up, you want to emulate the qualities of that person. So draw a rough sketch of that person. It need not be the exact same. I'm not going to look at, I'm not going to judge whether you have drawn the person exactly same or not. That's not important. Just draw a rough sketch. And then just beside it, say if you're doing it on the left hand side of your page, on the right hand side, please describe that person using any 3 describing words. You know that describing words are called adjectives. So describing any quality that you want to adopt, you want to imbibe. Probably the person you look up to as your idol is a very sincere person, hardworking, very struggling, or maybe very wise, very intelligent, and there could be anything, children. There could be anything. It could be a very friendly person. He could be a very helpful person, or maybe very skillful, extremely alert at situations, can handle situations very well. So anything, any 3 things you like, children, about the person, please do that. That's your activity. Do this in a white page and stick it on your copy. Okay, so before you begin the question answers of this chapter, that should be the first page with this activity. I'm going to check this once the school reopens. Now coming to the chapter, Meeting Miss Trotwood, with the introduction. Although his father had died, David Copperfield lived happily with his mother until she married Mr. Murdstone, not a kind man. Mr. Murdstone's equally unkind sister came to live with them. Then David's mother passed away as well, and Mr. Murdstone and his sister continued ill-treating David. They made him work in a factory instead of sending him to school, so David went in search of his only living relative, his aunt, Miss Betsy Trotwood. Finally, after walking a long distance, he reached her house. Let's read the story to see what happened next. So we already get to know, children, the story, in fact, if you read the novel, you will see that this is written from the point of view of a mature man. David is now a grown-up man, and he writes, he reflects upon the past experiences of his life since his childhood, and he writes down these in the novel in the first person narrative. So everywhere it's I that he uses. He writes about his lifetime experiences, when his bitter experiences when he was just a little boy. right after his mother died, he was ill-treated by his stepfather, Mr. Murdstone, by Mr. Murdstone's sister, who started living with them in the same house. This house, in fact, belonged to Mr. David Copperfield, that is David's father. And we also find, David was ill-treated. He was beaten up. He was thrashed by Mr. Murdstone. He was not being, not allowed to go to school. Rather, he was sent to, he was in fact sent to a school which he really did not like. He did not like the atmosphere of the school. He really did not want to go to that school. It was not, the way he really thought education would be. That is called Salem House. So he hates going to Salem House, where Mr. Murdstone had put him, and he really wished to go to some other school where the atmosphere would be far more friendly. The students would be, very good, very well mannered. So Mr. Murdstone does not send him to school. Rather, he is being sent to a factory to work. So this is where the theme of child labor comes up. Okay, you need not know this much, children. You will get to read about these when you grow big. Okay, so finally, David thinks that, I have had enough and I don't want to live in this house anymore. And he decides to go to his grand aunt, Miss Betsy Trotwood, about whom he has heard from his mother. Okay, during his childhood, his mother had told him about Miss Betsy Trotwood, who was their only living relative, and he was now decided, he had made up his mind that no, I'm not going to take it anymore from Mr. Murdstone and his sister, and I'm going to run away to my aunt. Be it wherever she stays, I'm going to find that out. He in fact knew where she stayed, but that was a very far off place. He had to walk for a long time, for in fact a few days, spent his nights sleeping under haystacks. However, in spite of all these difficulties, David really felt that these difficulties are worth taking, because he really hoped that Miss Betsy Trotwood at least not treat him in that manner. At least the love and the care that he, was longing for would be given to him by Miss Betsy Trotwood, their only living relative. I had walked every step of the way, sleeping under haystacks at night. Fortunately, it was summer. My shoes were completely worn out, and my hat was crushed and battered, my shirt and trousers stained with heat. Dew, grass, and the soil on which I had slept might have frightened the birds from my aunt's garden as I stood at the gate. My hair had known no comb, no brush since I left London. In this condition, I waited to introduce myself to my aunt. So, in the very first, paragraph right at the onset, David gives us, she shows us a picture of how he looked when he had traveled and walked for such a long distance, for a great deal, and when finally he reached the house of Miss Betsy Trotwood, his aunt. So he had walked every step of the way. Okay, he had found no other modes of communication. He relied on his feet, and therefore he kept walking and walking. He slept under haystacks at night, and he was lucky enough that it was summertime, that it wasn't winter. Otherwise it would be impossible for him, isn't it, to walk on foot, to spend night outside, in the cold winter. Winters are really cold in the European nations, hence it is impossible for one to spend night outside in the darker times. And therefore he says that he was lucky. My shoes were completely worn out. After this, he talks about how shabby he looked when he walked for such a long distance. His shoes were torn; they were worn out. His shirt was soiled, stained, dirty, because he had slept in the mud. He had slept under the haystack, and he had come into contact with all with the world outside. So he had not got a chance to take bath or clean himself or wear clean clothes. Therefore, wearing that same dress, the same attire for a long time, walking and walking and walking out in the sun, in the weather outside, he looked very, very dirty. And he says that when he reached aunt's house, while he was standing at the gate, he felt that probably he looked so scary that the birds inside aunt's garden would also be scared looking at him. So he thought probably he was going to give them a fright for their life. My hair had known no comb, so no combing, no brushing since he left London, and this is the condition in which he reaches aunt's gate. Do you think aunt would be, very happy to see him? First of all, Miss Betsy Trotwood had not seen him grow up, has not seen him for a long time. She had only visited their house once after he was born, and when he was just a baby. So Miss Betsy Trotwood is not at all going to recognize him. Secondly, seeing a boy in such a shabby and dirty manner, probably she would think that he is a street boy, isn't it? And probably she would not even let him enter the gates. So there were a lot of things going on inside David's mind. He was a little anxious. He was worried. What would aunt's reaction be? Would she, accept me? Would my hopes be fulfilled? The hopes that I'm pinning onto her. So there were a lot of things that he kept on thinking. Now children, we have come across two words in this passage, the meanings of which are not given. I'm going to write those in the board so that you find it easy to understand the chapter by knowing these easier meanings. So I found two words. One is haystack, another is fortunately, the meanings of which are not mentioned in your book. There is only the meaning of battered mentioned here. So haystack means packed pile of hay. Hay, is dry grass which is used for various purposes. So this is when dry grass is all packed together in a pile, in huge amount. This is called haystack. So beneath these David seemed to have slept, which means that probably it was a little hut kind of a thing, or probably it was placed at a position higher and below which David could take shelter. And another word is fortunately. Fortunately, children, it means luckily. Okay, so you can write down the meaning of these two words in your book itself with a pencil, so that when you read the text you find it easy to understand. Apart from this, we have no other words which are difficult, which will be difficult for you to understand. Now children, let us stop our explanation today here. We shall continue in our next class with the rest of the portion of the chapter. I really want you to read the chapter well, children. That is very important. Please reread it. At least twice you should give a thorough reading to the chapter. Only then you can be confident of knowing every line. You can be confident of where, what takes place. And you can answer any question which is set from inside the text. Thank you very much, children. Have a nice day. Stay healthy and stay happy. Bye-bye.